Morning, Admiral.
Good. Good morning, all. Welcome to St. Louis. It's great to be back in person. I know many of you just arrived yesterday or probably the night before. We're doing the DSO training, but I know pretty much everybody else in the room has heard enough from me. So let's get to the main event. The Commandant of the United States Coast Guard, Karl Schultz.
Well, I'm a fan of short introductions, and that may have been the shortest yet, Alex. I appreciate that. I figured after 4 years of trying to get together with the auxiliaries, you might give me like a 30-minute introduction, because no one probably knows who the heck I am. Hey, listen, I am excited to join you today. What a treat to be here. We just came in last night from some travels down in Latin America on some important issues, but I was just excited that it worked out where we could come through and have a chance to address the auxiliary leadership. I hope the Ntrain's going good. I saw a couple of your members here on the elevator coming from downstairs, and they said it's been great, good to get together. I saw some are already cutting out and trying to beat weather and get back when flights are available, but thanks for the privilege of being here. And I'm glad Admiral Bushman was very excited to come out, spend some time with you yesterday. Scott and I chatted a little bit this morning and told me I had some good chance to address you, participate in some award ceremonies, take some questions. And what I'm going to do this morning, I want to chat at you for a little bit. I think really, what's probably most valuable for me, and I think for Admiral Bushman, who's a key cog in the whole organizational DNA of how we do operations and things that interface with the auxiliary, where BSX and other things sit, is that both of us take away what's on your mind. I'm sure Scotty got some of that yesterday. We didn't get a chance to match notes, but he's going to fly back with me today, so we'll have a chance to have a couple hours together too. But I am excited to be with you. And I'm winding down near the end, and at the end of the day, maybe next time I'll be back on that side of the dais there. Maybe in that uniform, we'll see. I'm excited you're here because a couple of years ago we talked about a few changes in uniforms, and I think, and I love them to death, Larry told me we might have a mass exodus of all auxiliaries. So I think we've survived that, and I think what we wanted to do was put some distinction out there for the organization called the Coast Guard Auxiliary, and maybe give you an option that was a little more flexible and agile. So we'll see where that goes, but I'm hoping that we're seeing some folks wearing it, that's a good sign, and I want to affirm personally to you that there was no move to ever take uniforms from the auxiliary, because I know that's so important to you and all, but we're just trying to make sure we had those right distinctions between the active and the auxiliary and our civilians, because we do different things, and statutorily we're bound by different things. But let me just tell you, thank you. I think that's the most important thing is to start with. It hasn't been an easy time for any organization. We're a Coast Guard right now, 42,000 active duty plus or minus, authorized to 8,100 civilians, and striving to get to 7,000 reservists over the course of my last 4 years. My goal when I came in was to stop the bleeding in the reservists and grow 1,000. We've stopped the bleeding in the reservists. We've grown a couple hundred, but it's tough to go find people. We're short about 700 non-rates, and when you roll up junior petty officers, almost 1,200 people in the Coast Guard. And that's the active duty folks working for pay, with an organization with a great brand. And I kind of make a parallel construct to the United States Coast Guard Auxiliary, which is a world-class organization, and I saw we're down about 4,600. I say, all right, that's you can look at that and say, boy, that's a tough story. You can look at that and say, boy, that's a story of an organization with a lot of resilience and survival. And I look at it as the latter, and I say, how do we take the moment where hopefully we're coming out of the pandemic? And I'm cautious about that because we still see things popping up. But writ large, I read a couple things last night to say the flu may be a higher danger again than the pandemic. So I'm hoping we're towards the end of that. But I'm hoping there's a moment to transition and think about how the world's best Coast Guard with the world's best volunteer organization gets that brand out there and really starts energizing folks. But again, that's an aspirational thing. I think what we got to look at is the perspirational thing, or what are we going to do with the folks we have in the ranks? And I think we're doing that, and you're doing that. There's tremendous work going on. I look across America, and Scott and I were sector colleagues. We were PB colleagues back in the early days in the 7th District. We were sector colleagues at later points in life. We worked together when I was at Southcom and he was at the district. He's my deputy at Lant. We have watched the operational Coast Guard for a while. We've watched the boating safety mission. We've watched boating safety, recreational boating safety, really move to predominantly an auxiliary mission. And then we've watched what's been the impact of 24 plus months of global pandemic. Boating sales, I think, remain up 15 plus 20%. Fatalities on the water were 25%. Injuries below the level of fatality, I think, were 26%. Numbers of accidents were up 25+%. There is a huge clamoring for men and women of the Coast Guard Auxiliary to help us on the waterfront, to help us in the classroom, to help us just visibly, when they see you at a boat ramp, I think it reminds them, hey, there's Coast Guard out here, and I need to conduct myself appropriately. I need to have my gear. I need to go back and get that last fire extinguisher out of the trunk. I think that is critically important, remains really where we need to be. I think about all those different things you've evolved to do. I think about the changing Coast Guard. If any of you happen to watch the State of the Coast Guard, you know, that's a little bit where I see us. We're the world's best Coast Guard. And I say it cautiously, because I think when I say that, I think there's an element of the Coast Guard that says, hey, we don't have to change. So I say we're the world's best Coast Guard with a growth mindset and a thinking mindset and an adaptive mindset, because, you know, we need to be more representative of the nation we serve. Boy, if you stop and say, hey, we got the Coast Guard figured out at 15% women in our ranks, boy, that's not a winning conversation when 50% of the American workforce is female. So I'm cautious when I say we're the world's best Coast Guard. We operate like the world's best Coast Guards. We need to hire, train, retain like the world's best organization with the best HR and talent management practices, and we're focused on that. And we got to make sure those practices portend and play forward into our Coast Guard auxiliaries. So we got to work on that together. But I think that's an area where we could use some help. I think the auxiliary has been very helpful in the past in helping us recruit. I know they've been very helpful in parts of the country on the Coast Guard Academy. And we need to go find these bright young men and women and kind of think about who they are. They're a 18 to 26-year-old cohort when only about 25% of them are eligible to join the Armed Forces. That's because of prior drug use, medical background, you name it. 75% in that demographic are not eligible to serve. And then when you put the next filter on that, which is a propensity to serve, that's down around 10 or 12%. So I've had the privilege, and Scott just did one recently, but you know, you go up and you mentor this group of young kids, young Americans that want to serve at Cape May. And the method I normally do is they've been up there for a couple of weeks and all they do has been screamed at, and they don't really know each other, and they got a couple hours with you and your master chief in private from their company commanders. And I always go around the room and I say, give me the answer to a couple key questions. Who are you? Where are you from? And how'd you end up here at the United States Coast Guard Training Center, Cape May? And I'll tell you, 95% of them are there because they knew somebody in the Coast Guard. They had a cousin, an uncle, a friend of a cousin, uncle. They knew an auxiliarist. That one comes up a lot. He's an auxiliarist in my neighborhood who told me about the Coast Guard. So you are a huge force multiplier. But 95% over 3 or 4 times that I mentored came to us because they knew somebody that pointed them our way. So I would say I throw that out as an opportunity, a challenge for us to think about too, is how we put your credible voices, your recognized, leaders in your community, both in your private lives and your professional Coast Guard volunteer lives. But that is a big opportunity. I think about back in the Coast Guard, what's going on in that changing Coast Guard. You don't have to look too far than Chesapeake Bay right now. And you got this ever forward ship stuck there. Went aground a week ago Saturday. That ship's 1,095 feet. That's a sister ship of the Ever Given that was stuck in the Suez Canal months back and blocked the Suez Canal for 6 days. And you heard a lot about that because there was ships sitting off the ports of LA at the same time. And they talked about the global supply chain. And we're living that. Someone told me in the Port of Baltimore, the port director, he says, I don't know, how many chips you think are in a Range Rover? And I'm thinking, it's got to be a big answer. It's going to surprise me. I'm saying, 80. He says, sir, it's like 4,200 chips. I mean, this global supply chain is very real. And the things like 1,095-foot ships coming in our ports, getting stuck in Chesapeake Bay, blocking the Suez Canal. The work we do, the waterways, MTS, Maritime Marine Transportation System work that enables about 30 million jobs and $5.6 trillion of annual economic activity. That is waterfront work. There's a cyber element to that. I'm excited about the Coast Guard Auxiliary taking a renewed interest or a newfound interest in cyber. We're in the process of creating a cyber mission specialist rating. We're creating a warrant officer rating that goes with that. Finding young men and women with the interest is not hard, with the aptitude a little harder. We're not going to take kids right out of Cape May and send them off to be cyber specialists. We're going to do it like the DIVE program because you will spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to give these young men and women the training. So you're going to have to be an E5 in the Coast Guard, and then we're going to select you to go into the cyber program. And then for officers, we have a new cyber major. I disappointed a lot of them when I was up there doing my leadership address. Admiral Ray and I were up there, did a little tag team talking to the cadets. But these young men and women who are very bright, who want to do this, think, hey, I picked the cyber major, I'm going to go out and do cyber for the next 20 years of my life. That's not exactly how the Coast Guard works. You have to go out and have an operational specialty and then a subspecialty. So we're sending a handful of them right to cyber with a commitment after those initial tours to go back to a sector. We're sending some to sectors and saying after a couple of years, you're going to go to cyber. But we got to give them a chance to succeed. If they don't, the first thing those young men and women, they're the first ones out the organization when they don't see a pathway beyond lieutenant or 04. So we're working through these, but boy, is there a need. If you have some interest, some skill sets from the private sector and want to help us there, I think we got to figure out how to last ship your talents. We just deployed, and I'm not sure we're 100% there, we're close, a cyber mission, a cyber professional, like we have the port security specialists at the sector. Every sector will have a cybersecurity specialist in addition to ports, and we'll have one at the 9 districts in the 2 areas. And I think that is the interface point where folks in the auxiliary with the wherewithal for cyber, obviously some national connective tissue there, but I think in the field, there's a connection at every one of our key field operating nodes. And I would just toss it out there for you to think about and challenge you to, if that's your thing, how can you maybe take your thing and match it? The chaplain program, we're up to 75 auxiliary chaplains. I just talked to Dave Hansen out in the hallway, who's still pastoring and 17 years as auxiliarist. Boy, you talk about impact. I think Scott and I would tell you it's not hard to reflect on the men and women of the service, just like you and your kids and your families. It's been a tough couple of years, and I think, this mass exodus from the workforce, restaurants can't find young men and women work. I think young men and women, and I say young men and women, I'll sort of put that broadly over the Coast Guard. Our average age is probably around 26 years old, but there's a lot on people's lives. We ask them if you're assigned to a ship, some point in the last 24 months, particularly the first 4 to 8 months, we asked them to get on a ship and leave your families behind. And they were wearing N95s and spending 2 weeks somewhere near the United States before we pushed them down range to make sure they weren't going to make each other all sick, but their families are still home in an uncertain environment. We've got 1,000+ active duty members that are still waiting pending religious accommodations and pretty stressed out about this vaccination. There's not a lot of ambiguity, a lot of discretionary space, but we're trying to do that in a values-based approach, but many are stressed about that. We normally have about, on average, 4 or 5, 6 suicides a year, which is 4 or 5, 6 too many, and we try to drive that to 0. But we're at that number already. We just lost a young ensign on a ship in Alaska last week, and there's a lot on people's minds. So I think the touch points where people with a little more life seasoning experience, perspective, where you're connecting with an operational unit, the auxiliary chaplains, where I started that conversation, boy, they've been a force multiplier. Our chaplains were always overworked, our uniformed Navy chaplains, but the auxiliary chaplain program, I would tell you, that's a spike the football moment success story, and I thank you for that. Aux chefs, I was up in the Canadian Arctic, and who serves us dinner in the wardroom but an aux chef, and that was kind of neat. And the Canadian Coast Guard commissioner and his senior leadership team, they're like, this auxiliary thing is pretty fascinating. And I said, how long is he on board? Did you come up with you? I said, no, he's been on board for the entire deployment. And I'm not saying that's the model of wash, rinse, and repeat do all over the Coast Guard, but our auxiliaries are doing terrific things. We do events. When I was a land area commander, there was always auxiliaries working with my culinary specialist team when we were entertaining DOD interlocutors, international folks. Sometimes we see them in headquarters. But you guys do tremendous things. And I think our challenge is stabilize the numbers, help you amplify your mission. I think what we need to figure out is what are those new opportunities for the auxiliaries? What are the new opportunities for the Coast Guard? We have never been, I think, had more demand signal coming our way. As we talk about the domestic challenges, the increasing boating, the shared use waterways, there's 1,700 permits for wind towers off the East Coast alone. Wind is going to the Gulf. They're talking about floating because of the depths in the Pacific. How are we going to bring renewable energies off the coast of California? So waterways management, that is an area where we're going to have to up our game. We're going to absolutely have to probably have another senior officer at a sector working under the prevention chief or maybe another division. But waterways management, the private ATON work, the work of the auxiliaries, I see some opportunities for us to think through that differently. And I challenge you to offer us your perspectives on that. But sectors are busy. And then we look at the deployed Coast Guard, the increasingly globally deployed Coast Guard. Every combatant commander is looking for more Coast Guard. That's a good thing, because that is actually, for our men and women at sea, that have only been going on ships into ports and getting fuel and groceries and maybe playing touch football on the pier. They're going to go to some pretty cool places. They're going to do some pretty important work, whether they're going to sail on the Black Sea like they did in April to Hamilton. We didn't want to send a cruiser and an Arleigh destroyer up there because of the mounting tensions with Russian forces on the Ukrainian border in April of 21. We sent an NSC up there. We got soon to be six new fast response cutters on the Arabian Gulf. 4 are there. 2 more will go this summer. We're going to commission 1 here in April. The last one to go, we commissioned the John Sutton just recently here. But a lot of excitement there. But that is a place where the Navy is drawing down and the Coast Guard demand is high, the Indo-Pacific. And not necessarily auxiliary work here, but there's auxiliary work leaning towards that. I think some new opportunities maybe in the training domain. So I'm really excited about where we are. So I saw some head nods on the state of the Coast Guard. Over the last 4 years, if you reflect back on the themes, year 1, I talked about with our people. That was in the early calendar year 2019. The next year, I talked about why I serve. Not I, but through the lens of a rank and file Coast Guardsman. Next year, it was stronger together, and this year we talked about it united in service. And what's the common theme in those messages? It's really our people, right? We have tried. A lot of years, you saw all the new assets, all the new stuff. We're still doing that, and we're about $2 billion in acquisition dollars, and we're on the biggest acquisition delivery program of our, since the Second World War in terms of shipbuilding and other things. We're going to build the last 2 national security cutters, even some talk still about a 12th. The OPC is coming up for a recompete, but the first OPC is almost 65% complete, and we're going to award a contract for 11 more here in the spring, probably before the end of my watch. Waterways commerce cutters, so those are all the river tenders, the construction tenders. We're going to award a contract here in the coming weeks on that, and there's 3 variants. The contract will be the first 2. We're still building fast response cutters. Matter of fact, we're the first 64 in the entire program. It was a 58 ship program of record. We went and fought off to get 6 more for Bahrain. And the Congress just gave us 2 more because they see the work they're doing as a write-in on top. We're doing major things with our aviation assets and just a lot going on. But back to the people, we've really tried to dial down in on the people challenges. We've changed our policies where that group of 15% women can find the organization more compatible with balancing life and being a mom. Up to 84 days of leave. The ability to take your full leave and bring in a Coast Guard reservist to backfill you. Because if you're at a small boat station, a lot of pressure when you're standing port and starboard duty and it's a 40, 50 person unit and you go away for 84 days, boy, that doesn't just get absorbed. That's everybody takes them out. Now you're bringing some reservists who would love to have some active duty time, plug into a team. This person who has her first child, second child, making some life adjustments can go away, get their life in order, settle in their new routine. Childcare is tough all over the nation, very expensive. Things like that. Policies where we co-locate. If you look across our women element of the Coast Guard, probably more than 50% are married to other Coast Guardsmen. So we send 1 lieutenant, the male husband goes off to an FRC, and the spouse maybe gets a job at the sector. One's got 3-year orders, one's got 2-year orders. About 18 months in, you're starting to stress out. Maybe you have some children in there and like, hey, what are we going to do when you get signed next year? We said, wait a minute, this is ridiculous. How about we have a conversation up front and say you're both going to get 2-year orders, and then you can make decisions on all those things about it. You buy a home, you rent a home, childcare. So we've really dialed in on people. We've dialed in on spending money to go out and recruit people, and that's still tough. We're putting mobility in our recruiters' hands, but in that, not to put my challenges, our challenges on you, I would tell you, there's a lot of opportunity out there to take this organization called the Coast Guard Auxiliary and stitch it into the challenges the Coast Guard's having. But I know we've lost some, assets, aviation, surface, operators, inspectors. I think we snapped the chalk line, we are where we are. Now we say, what are we going to do with what we have? How are we going to operationally employ them best? How are we going to come up with a little branding together about going out there and taking the Coast Guard brand and the Coast Guard Auxiliary brand, because it's part of the same brand, and really getting people excited to come join our ranks and do the work of the nation that's out there for us. So I think at this point, I said I would be short, but I think the things that I want to leave you with is really thank you. You are here, you are the leaders of the auxiliary, you care. Folks have been doing this, we're Where's my almost 40-year auxiliarist here? I got some right down there, right, ma'am? Are you 38 years? Who up here's got 30 years in the room here in the auxiliary? How many of you? Okay, how about more than 20? The 30's got to keep your hands up now. This is a math test. More than 20? Okay, keep your hands up, 20, 30s. More than 10? Yeah, look at that. So this is a group that's invested in this thing called the Coast Guard. And the Coast Guard, our greatest strength is our agility, our adaptiveness, our ability to be tested and come through that and get better through every test. And that's what we have been focused on, is we have stood the watch. We've unfortunately, and probably to a high degree of frustration, maybe sidelined you more than you want it to be. And I think those are tough choices. You know, we had some very, very frank, difficult discussions when we were trying to figure out what does the impacts of a global pandemic look at an organization that cares about its people. And then, you know, when you think back to the earliest weeks, months, days, weeks and days, you know, clearly there was a higher propensity of tragedy and very high degrees of sickness when you got older. I'm a 60-year-old guy. I'm in the higher demographic. It was not lost on me as we looked into this, you know, but we have to make some tough choices. Now I think what we have to make sure is we're really recognizing where we are and driving out unnecessary fear and anxiety. You know, Monday we'll bring back the federal workforce. I've got federal civilian employees who haven't been to work in 2 years in the office space. I've felt like we've offered them a safe workplace for the good part of the last year and a half, to be frank. But we're going to figure out, you know, in my mind, the future doesn't look like, hey, I've been a teleworker for the last 2 years, since I'm a teleworker forever. You know, the Schultz view, and I'm one voice, and we have to figure this out, is, hey, you're a federal employee, and the mandate is you come back to work on Monday 50%, and then a few weeks down the road, you know, the other 50%, but we're giving you a safe workplace. Now, if you have some special circumstances in a high-risk situation, oh, maybe I don't want you to come back to work. If you had a previous telework agreement and you telework 2 days a week, I think we start there again, and then if you demonstrate you've been, you know, more successful and impactful than ever before, maybe we can alter that a little bit. But I think we have to figure out, you know, what is the organization going forward. And I think for the auxiliary, we got to make sure we're not carrying over some of our, you know, what was instructive thinking, thoughtful thinking at the time, and playing it forward to the frustration of your membership as well here. I talked a lot about decisional agility over the course of the pandemic. And in my mind, what I told the team was that was leading through leaders who are closest to the problems, who understood the challenges. It was making the decisions that were necessary at the time with the best information, but not staying wedded to them when the information changed, because it changed weekly, it changed hourly. And I think that model is still where we're at. And I think that's the model we have to say with the auxiliary going forward is, hey, what are those mission spaces? What are parts of the country? If things, little flare-ups and things come up, we got to make sure we don't frustrate an organization that, you know, we overlaid some heavy security requirements a year. So the uniforms got some people excited, other things. But we need to sort of steady the ship. We need to figure out what are those things most important to the Coast Guard, to the nation. Where are those areas where the Coast Guard auxiliary can best complement that work and really get off to the races. And I think you help us recruit, and we make sure we tell the story about the Coast Guard Auxiliary, and maybe we do a little creative thinking and branding in there. But I'm excited about where we're at. I'm excited about turning the corner on this pandemic. I'm really excited to be with you here today because we've tried to be here and meet with the auxiliary for a long time. And when Alex in Orlando, they're trying to stretch that decisional agility. Man, we're not going to cancel. We're not going to go, sir, we got to cancel. I said, Alex, I knew you were going to get here, but you did it on your terms, and I'm absolutely aligned with you because that's how we lead. We lead through leaders. And I want to thank Alex and Gus and the entire leadership team for keeping this organization tightly stitched together. And I'm really excited to watch where you go and be cheerleading on the sideline. And who knows, like I said, maybe be out there with you one day. But let me stop there because I said I'd chat for 15 minutes. I chatted for 23 minutes. And let me take the balance of time to see what is on your mind. And you can direct something to me if you had a question for Scott as DCO, or Scott, you can jump in and add your voice to this, and you may have some deeper perspectives. But what's on your mind regarding the Coast Guard and the interface with the Coast Guard Auxiliary? Anyone want to break the ice here? Yes, sir. Tell me where you're at a little bit. And
Good morning, Admiral. Joe Genatasio, Hamilton, New Jersey.
My Hamilton guy.
That's right.
My wife just sold my dad and my father-in-law's house from Hamilton. And we're actually getting together tomorrow and sort of celebrate. He passed this summer. He was a teacher and Alabama football coach who settled in Hamilton. So Hamilton is very close to the Schultz's hearts here.
I have an ice cream store, so you and your family are welcome to come by.
Well, we're only going as far as Delaware tomorrow to all meet, because one of my sister-in-law is now in Brigantine and my brother-in-law is down in D.C. with DHS, so we decided to meet in the middle. But when I do come by, we'll come for ice cream. I'll have a little more time for that come this summer.
Absolutely, sir.
What's the best flavor?
It's
all good?
traditionally mint chocolate chip.
All right, I'm on it. I'm on it. What's your question?
Thank you for sharing on where we are as a Coast Guard and the auxiliary is now. If you would hazard being creative, where do you see, or where would you like to see the Coast Guard in 10 years, Coast Guard Auxiliary in 10 years, sir?
You know, I think the question is sort of a generic answer would be I'd like to see the Coast Guard Auxiliary, and you can grab a seat. I think I'd like to see the Coast Guard Auxiliary lashed up to the Coast Guard where we are in 10 years. I think that's the real challenge, is what 10 years, you know, it's hard to predict where the Coast Guard is going to be in 6 months some days. You know, we're in an annual federal organizational model where you get budgeted annually. We'd probably be a more efficient federal government if we did couple-year budgeting, and we could be a little more strategic. And when we do annual budgeting, we just got the fiscal year 22 budget, and the fiscal year started 1 October. We got it, what, a week and a half ago? You know, which is, in Washington, that's a success, because the clock probably didn't expire till midnight. We got it done at 8 p.m., so we got it done early, except it was 5 months and 28 days late. But we lose the 5 months and 28 days late. We got it done 4 hours early. I think we need to be lashed up together. So I think we will change. You know, what I would tell you, the good news is, and Scott and Steve Poulin and Linda Fagan and Mike McAllister, your active duty leadership, and Jason Vanderhayden and Bushy and Gene Williamson and others, we have talked incessantly about a more ready Coast Guard. And we've taken this readiness narrative to Capitol Hill. Not to get budget wonky, but from 2011, the Budget Control Act, 2013 sequestration, the next 8 years, we lost 10% of our operational purchasing power. That'd be like you losing 10% of your budget at home on the things that allow you to go day to day. Last three, 4 budget cycles, we've had a 22% uptick in O&S. So we now have a little bit of wherewithal to solve some things. So what do we do with those resources? We're starting to get funded for pushing a ship. You know, our budget will go to the Hill on Monday, the 23 budget. You'll get the first glimpse of that. And we're starting to see some money for activities before we even do them, or as we're doing them. That's different. I think what we need to do is, how do we tie the auxiliary to support us in those mission areas where people want to see more Coast Guard. Just the global piece, that's a little harder, but it's, you know, how do we find connections? Cyber. Maybe there's some places where we're going to a blended training model. Right now, you know, it used to be every training was a coastie got in a car, bought an airplane ticket, or government bought an airplane, sent them somewhere for 5-week school. Now we say, maybe there's a smarter way. Maybe you can do some of that at your unit. You're not gone so much. Maybe there's a portion of that you need to do in the mosh pit of life in a training center. I'm not sure if there might be some opportunities to try to tie some auxiliaries to that. I think recreational boating safety, when I think about, you know, all the activities, you got up in New London under the Gold Star Bridge, if any Connecticut and New England folks here, that is now an offshore supply vessel operating base. It's going to be. They're going to be bringing, you know, renewable energy components, the turbine parts, the blades out there. They're going to be pounding those into the seafloor. So you're going to see different activities. You're going to see a heightened activity. You're going to see more, you know, paddle craft, personal watercraft, jet skis going faster. I think that demand, RBS, I think is going to be here 10 years down the road. I tell you, if the growth continues, you know, we got real challenges because the waterways are already congested. So I think you know, do we have to think through aids to navigation? We talked a little bit in previous years about more virtual aids to navigation. Virtual aids work if you're on a boat and you got some sophisticated electronic charting system, but if you're, you know, operating a stand-up craft or something, we got a lot of things to think through. So I think in that waterways management, in the cyber, in the RBS, in the training, I think there's a lot of things there. But I think it walks back to where I started. I think it's really lashed up at our hip. You know, as we evolve in 10 years, how does the Coast Guard Auxiliary come with us? This people piece, you know, I think the 18 to 26-year-old mindset. I don't know if it ever goes back to the mindset when Schultz and Bushman were young guys. You know, my dad was a 35-year public educator, coach, went on to be an adjunct professor. My father-in-law, you know, teacher, coach, ran a camp there in Hamilton. You know, we were a generation who sort of picked and stuck a little bit. You know, we're going to be an organization now trying to keep people in that don't want to pick a path and do it forever, and we got to keep them in, but we have to go find them, we have to energize them. I think there's a place there where I say every Coastie's a recruiter. I would say every Coastie and every reservist and every auxiliarist needs to help us be a recruiter, both for your own organization and for our organization. So I'll stop there, but I think it's going to be about staying together, staying lashed up. We have a new award coming, and we worked with Alex on that. It's about recognizing, those units that really integrate the auxiliary and the active and the work of the Coast Guard well. I think it's, as a sector commander in Miami, had a lot of auxiliarists, from the top of the Keys up north of Fort Pierce, and some are in this room, the Barths and others. This award is important because I think just managing the skills banks of the auxiliarists, through one lieutenant junior grade in the sector who's already overwhelmed with their duties, we got to figure that out. And we had some different models over the years. So I think it's what we do, and maybe an equally important part of that is how we do that and how we do it better. This award is to sort of recognize those units that maybe do that the best, and then make sure we share that best learning across the country so we're optimizing all the unique talents that the auxiliary brings. So thanks for the question. And mint chocolate chip, I got that. You don't remember a thing I said, but I'll go to remember mint chocolate chip. Bushman, Scott's writing it down for us both, right, Scott? Yes, sir. Gus.
The next question. Is this on? Okay. In your remarks, you mentioned clergy assistance, culinary assistance, and healthcare as 3 areas in which the auxiliary recently emerged as a force multiplier. Do you envision future initiatives for the Coast Guard in which the auxiliary will play a supporting role?
Yeah, and Gus, I didn't talk about the healthcare, but for a couple of guys that in studying migration, operationalizing responses to mass migrations and migration activities, the southwest border is getting a little hot again. And we saw the auxiliary complement our efforts with Allies Welcome. We saw the auxiliary complement our efforts at the southwest border. We're going to get another big ask. His articles in the last 48 hours, 96 hours. Glenn Van Herk, the Northcom commander, was testifying from what he calls his posture statement, sort of his budget ask for the upcoming or the current 22 budget year. He talked about the DoD, persistent ask to DoD for support at the border, and they'd like to get out of that business. But we will have an uptick in Coast Guard activity there. We will have another demand for medical. We're about 20% short across our medical positions in the Coast Guard, our corpsmen. We're closing some of the dock gaps. We're bringing on mental health professionals, just an initial down payment. We have to find more of them. So, Gus, I think there'll be more medical work. I think auxiliary skills that can help us there. I sailed with Doc on the Eagle here from my friend from Miami, and it was good to catch up with him. But I think there's places like that. I think it's a lot to the question from my Hamilton colleague here a little bit. I think it's about the cyber, the medical, the chaplaincy. Obviously to be a chaplain, auxiliary chaplain, you sort of have to be cut from a certain cloth and experience set. So that's a finite pool. When we started that, Tom Walcott, is Tom here today? Yeah. Yeah, Tom and I had the conversation, and when I said, Tom, tell me a little about this auxiliary chaplain program. It's kind of interesting. And, I said, Tom, what do you think that right number is? We were about 35, Tom, at the time, if that? We had that conversation? Yes, sir. Or maybe 25, but he said, hey, I think the right number is when we stop getting good people that want to be auxiliary chaplains. And I mean, but really, that was been the mindset. And then I said, what's that notional? He goes, maybe 50. And we've just blown through that. And we're finding great folks. The auxiliary chef program, Gus, I think is fantastic. The places where auxiliaries go in and maybe give the culinary specialists a little break on the weekend or do something special. But I tell you, that's well received, because I think I started teasing this out, and I think there's a lot of stress on our folks. And I think just when they see some folks that come in and bring a little bit of sense of humor, maybe give them a little break in the galley, a little different meal, I think that breaks up their lives. So, Gus, I think it's finding those next opportunities. But I think medical is what we're trying to do is close the gaps, that 20%. And Dana Thomas, our chief medical officer, is working a plan with some budget asking. And really what we're trying to do is build some expeditionary reserve medical capacity. So it's not just fixing our active problems, because right now I haven't been to a unit with a corpsman or a doc that hasn't deployed to the border at least once. And I'll tell you, 2.5, 3 years ago, what we did was we made some budget decisions 5 or 7 years ago, and we got rid of what we called the health benefit advisors. We got rid of the certified medical assistants. So corpsmen were sitting there making appointments. They weren't really experiencing high job satisfaction. We brought back HBAs. We brought back certified CMAs. Corpsmen are back doing corpsman stuff. But now corpsmen are getting deployed in addition, and they're not feeling like they're doing their corpsman stuff well at their parent unit because they're getting yanked down the board. They're tired. And I'm not so sure that's the model they thought they signed up for forever. So I think having some reservist, expeditionary-like teams, teaming in some auxiliaries, I think that will be a great place for us to partner together too. All right, Gus? Thank you. Yes, sir. Terry, you just do it all, huh?
That's accurate.
Master Chief Parker,
Uh-oh.
BSX 12, Commandant. I have a question kind of in line with your medical and the automatic disqualifiers of a mindset of a medical disqualification for our young men and women across America that cannot get into the organization because of something that's happened due to the increase of pharmaceutical stuff that tends to be just automatically given. They're on it for a short time, get off of it, years go by, and now because it was prescribed to them at a younger age, they're no longer allowed to come into the military. Is there consideration of making changes to our enrollment process and being able to get young men and women in due to something that happened to them? Could that help bridge some of the 10% gap because of mental health?
Yeah, you know, Master Chief, I think Master Chief's pointing to right now the MEPS, the Military Entrancing Processing System. There's the medical standard, and this affects all the services. MEPS is across, you know, the DoD services, and we're in the same model there. And I think there's some recognizing that, you know, maybe how we react as a society to medical challenges coming up is really putting a pretty tight filter on things. So I think we're trying to work through that. That is a definite impediment to recruiting for us, Master Chief. I don't have a clear sight picture, and I think Doc is working with that. I think DoD is seeing some of the same challenges. You're in the United States Army, you know, they'll give you $30,000 to sign up and be on the bus in 30 days and show up at Army recruiting. You know, we this winter said, how deep can we possibly go to get a Coast Guardsman at Cape May, January, February, March? That's really the lean. January, February is really like the desert season when it's hard to get people to go to Cape May and be in boot camp. So we were offering maybe 7,000. We got up to about 12 or 15,000, but we can't do that to fill up the bus. We don't have the budget wherewithal for that. So we have to understand those impediments, and you know, is that serving us well? If you had, you know, I used to sit there as the congressional liaison in the House of Representatives, the chief of congressional affairs. You know, thousands of letters from members of Congress about, you know, Johnny can't get in because he had this when he was a child, and then, you know, he hasn't had this for years. I think we got to think through that a little bit, and then, but that's a bigger than a Coast Guard issue. We'll be a voice at the table for that, Master Chief, but we won't be the sole voice on that. All right, down here in the front. We got everything settled down. The coffee mug is back on the table.
Well, that's why I keep a lid
I
on.
thought you were going to throw it at me. I thought if you were ready, if I didn't give the right answer, I was going to get an auxiliary imprint on my forehead this morning.
Not for you, sir. I do other people for that.
Okay.
That's why the ring
I'm
is
just
full.
watching which hand you're holding the mic with, so if the cup comes up in the right hand, I'm going to get nervous, because you're probably a righty.
No, this is my drinking hand. So.
Okay.
So I'm Byron Moe.
I'm really concerned about which is the throwing hand, but that's okay.
I'm ambidextrous, sir.
All right. Commander, help me out down there, okay? What's your question, Mr. Moe?
I'm Byron Moe. I'm from the First Northern District. I'm the District Commodore. Live up in New Hampshire. One of the things in our area we've been trying to do, and we get some support from the Ombudsman and from commanders, but it's getting traction to help the families, because we live in these communities.
Yep.
We're there full time. And when you have a married couple and one deploys and one's at home and they need help, we had one where we had the husband deployed on one of the cutters, and she went off for shoulder surgery and was incapacitated for a while. So we were in mowing her lawn, getting her groceries, taking care of all the little tasks. Nothing for us to put in hours for. It'd make a great program for us for mission support, because that's what it is. We're giving that deployed person or people on the base that are away from their family from their first time connection to the community, and this knowing that they've got a family that's going to take care of their family back home. And you have one ombudsman for a whole sector, and we have almost 500 people that are reaching out to help. But we need to formalize that, and I'm wondering if you thought that would be something good to move with and formalize, that we could add that kind of support to our mission set.
Yeah, you know, MMO, that's a great question. I think I didn't mention the Ombudsman program, but that is a great thing. You know, we've had some auxiliaries that have been ombudsmen. it's Ombudsman Appreciation Day coming up. I think to this Coast Guard family, that has some challenges. That life goes on when your Coast Guardsman's deployed, when your Coast Guardsman got duty. I think we need to think through what that looks like. You know, you're right. There's a sort of a propensity to get caught up in op hours and logging data and aux data, and we brought aux data online and went to the cloud, and I think that's important, but I think it's understanding what really moves the needle in terms of benefiting the organization. So auxiliary ties to the Ombudsman program. You know, we've with the Ombudsman program in recent years, I think, you know, I've watched it, Master Chief Vanderhaden's wife and my wife Dawn and Master Chief Williams' wife are sort of these ombudsmen at large. We've tried to not put a lot of programmatics in the ombudsman program. We try to find a spouse that wants to represent a unit as the ombudsman and serve as an interface point. But that's an individual. And before there was like, well, it shouldn't be auxiliary. Well, you know, it needs to be somebody that's in that space doing the work. I don't care who it is. It's someone that cares, that recognizes the importance and then does it. But it's really more of a network of support than one individual. You know, the ombudsman is the person that the command talks to and they interface with the families. That's sort of the interface. But, you know, building a team around that actually says, hey, I'm available if something comes up. Here's my speed dial. I think what we get into today is almost this, you know, apoplectic behavior about being near anybody's medical information, their lives. We have to protect that and the HIPAA and those things. But folks having a Rolodex of folks, maybe the ombudsman knowing here's a handful of auxiliaries in Maine, in New Hampshire, that are ready to go if someone had a crisis. They're not saying they're standing by their phone waiting, they're not on an alert, but there's 5 or 6 of them that if something came up, I can go down the list and probably get one of them that can step in and do something pretty quick to help somebody. I think that's a great idea. And again, is there a way to capture that hours? I don't know if that's important or not, but it's part of the work of the auxiliary to amplify the effectiveness of the Coast Guard. So I think that's a great suggestion. We're going to drop that I in the omnibus and just keep calling it the Ombudsman program, Mr. Commander. But we get an omnibus budget now a little bit, so that's how much the budget is filling our heads here a little bit. Thanks. That's a great suggestion. In the back, yes, sir. Oh, we'll go over here. I'm sorry.
No, Admiral, I had the mic again.
Gus, you coming too? All right.
Yeah, I got you too. And
he didn't even give me a choice to come to you first, so we're going to come to you in the back next.
We'll get back to him. You know who I am. I'm from Southern Delaware. My question is
you're a cop, Gus. That's why I'm not arguing with you. I'm just going to say
yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
And you're the Commandant. That's why I'm not arguing with you. Is there any anticipated Coast Guard impact based on current world situation? And if there are changes to active duty day-to-day operations, how could the auxiliary step up to fill those gaps?
Well, first off, I mean, what's going on in the world is, I think, what are we, 30 days into what's going on in the world. So obviously that's captivating everyone's attention. You know, what's relevant what's going on in the Ukraine is everything, because it's horrific, it's tragic, and I won't opine more on that than, you know, here's a sovereign, peaceful nation of Ukraine being invaded by Russia. What is the spillover effects? I think, you know, the Ukraine was a large exporter of grains and other things, so that's affecting the global supply chain. There'll be some implications to potentially the Coast Guard work there. President in Europe right now announced 100,000 Ukrainians as initial tranche. We're going to offer refugee status to 100,000 Ukrainians. I don't know exactly how that plays out, but allies welcome. We saw active duty Coast Guardsmen in Bahrain, meeting them at the airport there and helping process them. We saw Coast Guardsmen, or some auxiliaries here, helping at the processing places here, you know, in the United States, from Fort Dix, McGuire area, down to Fort Lee, all over 6 or 7 processing points. I think there's some opportunities there, Gus, related to that, to the current world events. You know, a little bit of change in Russian rhetoric yesterday, because it's not going exactly as planned, that maybe they're redefining success to look like the Donbas regions. I'm not sure what that goes, but we could be at this a year, we could be at this in months. There's going to be a lot of elements of this for a long time in terms of people that, you know, there's 3.5 million people that are left, and that number is growing fast. That'll be 10% of Ukrainian population here by probably the end of the month there. So I think there's some potential ties. And then, Gus, I think it sort of rolls back to the other question, you know, where does the auxiliary fit in? I think the auxiliary fits in where the emerging needs of the nation and the Coast Guard kind of go forward here a little bit. Okay?
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you. In the back, yes, sir.
Thank you, Julie. One of the questions that I had is that we have a good working relationship now ongoing with OEM and the Q department within the auxiliary. But one of the things that's holding a lot of people back in assisting the Coast Guard during disasters is qualifications. And one of the things that had been brought up a few years ago was sending people to Cape May to become train-the-trainers, to where, excuse me, to where we could have individuals come back within each district and train individuals on that within certain PQSs, so individuals can get those certificates, because sometimes that's all they need to finish their PQS underneath an emergency management type and for incident management. And if we could get those type of individuals back into the districts to where they could teach those certification courses to finish their qualification, I think then we could, let's say, augment and better support the active duty. Has there been any consideration regarding that?
Yeah, I'll be honest with you, I don't know the answer to that. I think what I would say is, time sort of froze on about 6 January 2020, and here we are on, late March 2022. So I think some of those initiatives that were working, we had to really take a whole different mindset on what we did at our major training centers, how we trained. First, we had to sort of shut them in, and we had to figure out, distance spacing. I think as we emerge out of that, what we need to do is sort of take an inventory and say, hey, where was that? Was that productive? Are we ready to bring that back? Are we ready to maybe think of that and say, hey, we used to send them all to Cape May to train the trainer. Maybe we could do some of that in a virtual environment. We used to send them up there for this duration of time. Back to my earlier point, maybe we could do collaborative environment. There's a finishing portion of that. I think that's the stuff that we need to sort of revisit and say, where are we going into the spring of 2022 on those good ideas that sort of just got frozen in time because of the way we had to adjust our business in the recent years with the pandemic. That'd be my sense of that. I don't know enough to say, hey, someone put a fork in that and said, no, that's not a good idea, so I don't want to say that. My suspicion is it's probably a good idea that just lost its momentum because of world events here a little bit. But I don't know, Larry, if there's something on that you got any thoughts, or Gus or others on that, but I don't have a keen insight on the specifics of that. But getting people certifications, anything that looks like train the trainer and you can spread the capacity out, generally in my mind is a good way to do business. Is that the most efficient way of doing that or not? I'm not sure. And then right now, Cape May, what we had been through, even in the back early part of this year when the Omicron spike was, we were trying to get 98 kids in the recruit class. Even if we could go find them, we got back to the point when, the physical spaces there weren't enabling some of that. So we have to just kind of make triage where the training centers are. I think we'll look like normal here pretty soon again. All right, anybody else?
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Julie Carey, 8th Western Rivers, Women's Leadership Initiative. You spoke some about what you guys are doing for women in the active duty and the full-time force to retain and promote them, make their careers easier. For a volunteer force,
I don't know if it's easier. It's make them not mutually exclusive, that you can be a Coast Guardsman and you can be a successful parent and a spouse. And that we need to do that for the men too, but I think it's different thinking. We can't think the way we did 32 years ago and be successful in 2022 here.
Absolutely. For a volunteer force, where our primary challenge is getting beyond what is perceived to be a good old boys club, what advice or thoughts would you have to offer us?
Well, I think we have some of the challenges in the Coast Guard that there's still perceptions that it's a good old boys club there too. I'll tell you what I think, having really pressed into this space for a lot of years, but from the vantage point of being the Commandant and having a little more leverage to actually drive outcomes than maybe other points in my career, was you have to recognize who are the culture keepers in an organization. So in the Coast Guard, the officer side, I think the culture keepers are the lieutenants and lieutenant commanders. They're the ones that wear a lot of the commands. They're lieutenant FRCs, they're 04s, and buoy tenders. It's key positions at the sectors. At the boathouse, the enlisted workforce, I think it's the E5s, E6s. Where the good old boy network thing perpetuates is who makes the boat crew assignment at a station. So, Commander, what's your first name? Christina. So Christina would love to break into the boat crew that Alex and Carl and Gus are on, because we're the kind of the boat crew that everybody celebrates the successes. But, I make the duty roster, and got a new opportunity because Alex isn't here one day, and I say, hey, Scott, why don't you come stay with us today? And Christina's waiting and begging to get in there, but she never gets a chance because the influencer is me. You know, I'm the E5 down there, and I get the duty schedule, and that's the control. And you have to understand where the culture keepers are in your organization, and I think you have to make sure the folks that shape and own the culture are sort of bringing a more forward-thinking mindset to say, Christina, your first name? Julie, again, thank you. Sorry, I dropped that. You know, Julie wants to be part of that, and they're fighting in. But you know, at some point, you make enough efforts. Your shoes are shined. All your PQS is done. Hey, put me in, coach. Put me in, coach. And finally, you know, at some point when coach doesn't even know you're sitting on their bench waiting to get in the game, you're sort of frustrated. And guess what? You're one of those 4,600 less auxiliaries here a little bit. So I think we have to recognize our own culture. Then we have to recognize what elements of our own culture shape the attitudes of folks that are in the underrepresented groups to be part of the mainstream culture. Really, everybody should be in the same culture. But I think that's what we see in the active side. You got to bust it up. And that's why I say, hey, when I talk about the world's best Coast Guard, I say that very cautiously because the white male majority member who's in control and shaping the boat crew and not letting Christina, I just validated that, hey, you're hitting it out of the park, buddy. Keep doing what you're doing. You are. We're saving lives. We're getting boardings done. We're doing great things. But boy, we're not going to survive as an organization unless we're 50% women, unless we're finding, you know, a society that's marching towards, you know, a high percentage of Hispanic representation. We're 17% now in a society that's north of 20%, marching towards 40%. So it's a business imperative, and really more than that, it's a moral imperative to do the right thing. So I think that's how I'd answer that, Julie. Yeah, great question. Others?
Admiral, one of our online viewers.
Oh, Gus, you're the interface online. This isn't just all Gus here. Okay, this is better. I'm okay with you now. You should have told me that before. I thought Gus was just sort of, I got the mic and I'm controlling the show here, Commandant.
To some small degree, the first two questions were mine. However,
Gus, I'm just teasing you because you let me.
Of course I let you. But one of our online viewers would like to know, do reservists receive points for training with auxiliary units?
Do reservists receive points for training with auxiliary units? I guess Alex just said there's an idea, so I guess the answer to that is no. But I will validate that, and I think, you know, we'll take a note to say, hey, there's something to think about there. Yeah. Okay, thanks, Gus. Anybody else? We time-wise, where are we at? We're at time? We're at, yeah. All right, well, listen, let me wrap up by where I started. Let me say thank you. You know, you guys truly are a fascinating, extraordinary organization. And for those of us like Scott and Carl here that had the chance to sort of ride left seat with you here for the good parts of our 38, 39-year careers, I just want to tell you thank you for what you do. Thank you for the flexibility and the adaptability. As the Coast Guard has changed, you have changed. I think we haven't been through a period that's going to demand more change of our service. I think the good news is we have convinced our own department, I think we've convinced the administration that the Coast Guard is really this unique instrument of national security, of homeland security, of goodness for the nation, whether it's a difficult problem. And I stay out of the politics of the border. I stay out of the politics of a lot of things. I look at what is the needs of the nation. And when things come up, everybody wants some part of the Coast Guard to come help them solve that. Every one of the department's challenge, whether it's Allies Welcome, whether it's this unified command group looking at cyber right now, whether it's you name it, the first thing they do is they come to the Coast Guard and they want some help with planning. Help us think through how we tackle a large contingency like that. You don't see that stuff. That's the stuff behind the background where we just get folks there, smart folks, and help them think through the problem. And then we say, all right, we need some field people. You know, Scott sent 20 bodies up to the department when Allies Welcome was just a concept. There's some portion of 100,000 people, 85,000 people are going to come to America pretty quick. DHS, the president put the rose on Secretary Mayorkas to own that. And they're like, hey, we got to make this can't fail. There was those 20 coasties that Scott sent up there. Was the sector commanders near all those sites where they're going to process them that went out there and started saying, hey, how do we help you? And then some of that rolled into auxiliary support or backfill, things like that. I just want to tell you thank you. We are proud of the men and women of the United States Coast Guard, and that includes the Coast Guard Auxiliary. And I say the challenge for us is to keep that decisional agility. It's to lead through leaders. It's to see opportunities. It's to say, all right, we're not a perfect Coast Guard. We're not a perfect Coast Guard Auxiliary, but I always come to work and say, how are we going to be a little better Coast Guard each and every day? And I challenge you to bring the mindset to the auxiliary. And, or volunteer, I will tell you, having represented the Coast Guard to the Navy League, having been involved with the auxiliary, volunteer organizations are tough. I mean, we just got to step back and recognize we all have opinions. And when you're in a paid position in an organization like the Coast Guard, the uniform side, that's very clear rank structure and stuff like that, you can offer your opinion, then you have to recognize where you fit in that organization, and that's sort of the end of the conversation, and you get to your release date or you're under your contract, and if you don't like it, you leave. Volunteer organization, folks have their opinions, and sometimes they'll let them go and move on to the greater good of the organization. Sometimes they just want to sit there and snipe, and that's human behavior. But I tell you, the best organizations, the best volunteer organization, I think what separates the Coast Guard auxiliaries is that we're not constrained by that. But I'm sure there's some of that, and I'm sure this last 2 years, there's a lot of folks that may bring some feelings that, hey, we were sidelined, it was frustrating, this or that. I would tell you, let's snap the chalk line and talk about where we're going as a Coast Guard auxiliary, lashed at the hip to the United States Coast Guard. So thanks for the privilege of being here today. We're going to be here all morning. I think we're sticking around through lunch. If there's some things maybe you didn't want to ask in a broader audience, but you want to co-opt me and capture me in a corner, I'd be happy to have a chat with you. Thanks for the privilege of being here. Thanks, Alex.
We have a little gift. We have a nice book for you. It's going to be an amplified commercial.
Maybe not for long, you can find a commercial. Thanks, Alex. Are you staying right here now? I think so.
Yes, stay with you for a second. Thank you. Thank you, Commandant. Well, circumstances prevented the Commandant from meeting with us over the past few years, but was it worth the wait? Yeah. Definitely was. Thank you so much. Terry, a couple announcements, of course.
I do. Just a couple of announcements. First, I think in the meetings that we've had this week, you've noticed that depending on the schedules, we've moved things up, we've changed them around. So I want to do part of what my job is. So I'm going to start with, it is an honor and a privilege for me to introduce the Commandant of the Coast Guard, Admiral Karl Schultz. Now, would you like me to read?
Once or twice this week.
Couple quick announcements. I've gotten texts. Some of you have gotten your hotel bills, and the tax is shown on that. We are going to be tax exempt. Once you check out, you're going to get an email with the final bill, and the tax will be removed. Also, the meetings, the large meetings, this wonderful presentation from the Commandant, and also OPCOM, Committee of the Whole, and the National Board meeting are on an auxiliary site that we have. It's the Coast Guard Auxiliary National Events YouTube site. And out in the lobby are some business cards with the QR code and the link. Take them back to your members. Let them know if they didn't get to watch live, they can still go to this site. These are saved from the last couple years now that we've done virtual, and they will be there. Have them watch the Commandant's presentation today, and if with interest, have them go back and watch the others. So these are going to be out on the tables. Pick them up and have a safe trip home. Thank you.
Go forth and train.